Welcome everyone to today's webinar for the launch of Call 2 for the Prepared project. My name is Eleanor Flynn and I'm the scientific coordinator of the Prepared project. And together with my colleagues, I'm going to share some information about this second call. So for those of you who are new to the project, I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and then I'm going to talk about the organizations and partners that join us in this work. And then I'll explain how the call for proposals will work, what you need to do to prepare if you want to submit an application, and things to remember if you're going to apply. All of the information is also available on our website for Call 2, preparedresearch.eu. And during this webinar, after I've explained the call for proposals, you will then hear from the supervisors in the Prepared project about their areas of interest and what they're interested in receiving applications about. You will also hear from two of our secondment organization partners in the project about the opportunities that researchers in this project will have to bring their study to them and apply their learning in a very practical sense. And finally, you will hear from two fellows who have been recruited in the previous call of this project, Call 1, about their tips and strategies for preparing to apply to the Prepared project. So with that, I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background on the project itself and where it came from. Prepared is a project that is designed to develop disability-inclusive responses to the world's most pressing global challenges. It's a postdoctoral research project, and so we welcome postdoctoral researchers from any discipline as long as their work is informed by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Here at the Centre for Disability Law and Policy in the University of Galway, together with our other employing partners in this project, we are building on the success of two previous Marie Curie actions, which were initial training networks for PhDs. And what we discovered from that work was that our PhDs were receiving excellent training and developing really interesting ideas, but there weren't enough postdoctoral opportunities for them to progress onto. So that's partly why we've created this Prepared Marie Curie Co-Fund project. Within this project, we have 3 employing partner organizations and 11 secondment partners that represent a wide range of academic and civil society organizations. So the employing organisations are ourselves at the Centre for Disability Law and Policy, the University of Galway in Ireland. We have our colleagues from the Institute for Higher Science, Social and Political Sciences at the University of Lisbon in Portugal. And then we also have Swiss Paraplegic Research based in Lucerne in Switzerland. So those are the employing organisations where postdoctoral researchers will be employed and carry out the main part of their research activity. But as I mentioned, we also have a large number of secondment partner organisations in the project. These include the Validity Foundation, the Independent Living Institute, the European Disability Forum, Inclusion International, who you'll hear from later on in the webinar, Fight for Right in Ukraine, CBM Global, who you'll also hear from later on in the webinar, the Disability Rights Fund, the European Network on Independent Living, Hungarian Centre for Social Sciences, the University of Lucerne, and Maastricht University. So these really offer a wide range of opportunities to our postdoctoral fellows to take the knowledge that they are gaining and developing in their work and apply it to a practical context where they choose a secondment with a civil society organisation, or to gain some further training or develop their research skills in a new arena with one of our other academic partner organisations. So that's as much as I'm going to say for now about the background to the project and the other partner organisations. And I'm going to use the rest of my time in this first session to tell you more about the call for proposals that is currently open. So this is our second call for proposals. And within this call, we can recruit up to 4 postdoctoral fellows who can be employed in Ireland, in Portugal, or in Switzerland. It's important for you to know that this is the final call for proposals in Prepared. So as I mentioned earlier, we previously recruited 2 fellows in Call 1. The fellows will have 3-year contracts, which again is a little bit longer than the typical postdoctoral contract, which is usually 1 to 2 years. And as part of their contract, they must do 2 secondments with our partner organizations. We, of course, as I mentioned, the existing secondment organizations that we have already, but if a fellow is doing a very discrete project that requires particular kind of expertise that isn't represented amongst our existing partner organizations, then we can always add new organizations for further secondments. So because this is a call for applications, we need the postdoctoral applicants to develop their own proposal for a topic. And they have a wide range of scope on how to do this. So we really have enabled the postdoctoral fellows to have the maximum freedom to develop their area of interest, as long as the topic relates to a major global challenge and the proposal will actually develop a disability inclusive response to that, then it falls within the framework of prepared. Of course, as well, it must take an approach that is based on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But among the supervisors who you'll hear from later on, we're interested in lots of different ideas for these big global challenges requiring a disability-specific response or a disability-inclusive response. So those range from climate justice, reproductive freedom, armed conflict, apartheid and genocide, movements for social justice, assistive technology, artificial intelligence, human rights in crisis, threats to the rule of law and democracy. Also interested in migration, refugees and asylum seekers, late-stage capitalism and neoliberalism, far-right resurgence and disaster preparedness. So that gives you an idea of the topics, but that's not an exhaustive list by any means. We're very interested in a really wide range beyond even those topics as well. So some important things to remember if you want to apply to this call is that you first need to check your eligibility for becoming a postdoctoral researcher. So PhD is a requirement of this application, which means that applicants must have reached all the requirements for the award of their PhD prior to the closing date of Call 2, which is the 13th of March this year. So you must already have been awarded your PhD or completed all the requirements of your PhD, including your viva or oral defense of your PhD and any corrections before you can actually apply for this application. Mobility is another requirement, which is a must in all Marie Curie applications. And that requirement means that applicants must not have spent more than 12 months in the 3 years prior to the application date in the country that they wish to apply to be employed in. So, for example, an Irish researcher could apply to one of the supervisors in Portugal or Switzerland, but could not apply to Ireland as their employing organisation for this project unless they have been out of the country for a long time before applying. So this is really important. And if you're not sure about whether you meet the mobility criteria, you can always contact us at our prepared email address in order to check. But the rules are very clear regarding the need to move countries in order to take up a position. This is part of the Marie Curie process. So the other things to remember if you are planning to apply to Call 2 is that you have to develop your own idea for a research topic. So unlike the Marie Curie doctoral networks where the topics are predetermined by the supervisors, because this is a postdoctoral network, the postdoctoral fellows must have the full freedom to develop their own idea for the research topic and write the proposal themselves, as long as it fits within the overall aim of prepared and matches the expertise of the supervisor they have selected. Which brings me on to the prepared supervisors and the need to approach a prepared supervisor and get support for your proposal before you apply. So you must have a letter of support from one of the 5 prepared supervisors, which you upload as part of your application. The deadline, again, I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again, is very important. So everything must be completed on the online application form on our website by the 13th of March this year. And make sure that you have all your supporting documentation ready to upload. So we might ask for example, for proof of your English language competency, since Prepared is a English language project, or proof of your mobility, or proof of your PhD award. So you must have gathered all of that documentation and have it to hand when you are starting the application process. It's very important that applicants also only use the document templates on the Prepared website for your proposal. So those are all ready and live on the website right now, and you can check them out. Make sure that you upload all of the application using those templates, not in your own template or different document formats. So the next thing I want to talk about is what happens after you submit your application. So the first thing that will happen is that the Prepared coordinating team will check your eligibility. So make sure that you meet the essential requirements of the application in terms of your PhD award, mobility, English language competency, etc. And we will also conduct some ethics checks on the proposed research that you want to undertake. So that will take us at least until the end of March this year. Once we've completed your eligibility and ethics checks, we move on to the peer review process, which is quite an intensive process during the application. So your application will be read by 3 independent international experts, and that takes place during April and May. This is the process that can take more time because we have to ensure we have 3 independent experts for each application. The scores that have been allocated to your application by the experts are collated and weighted, and then we rank the proposals in order to determine who should be shortlisted for interview based on their peer review scores. Again, we hope to complete that by the end of May, but these dates are relatively tentative because much depends on the reviewers, and the process can take a little bit longer than we anticipate. Once the shortlisted applicants have been developed, then we will call those applicants for interviews, hoping to do that during the month of June. And then once the interviews have been completed, applicants will be allocated further scores, and we will add their interview scores to their peer review scores to achieve a combined score and a combined ranking list of the applicants who are eligible for the award. Again, we're hoping to complete that by the end of June so that we can make the funding decision in July, with the goal for the fellows to take up their contracts in their employing organisations in September. But as I said, these dates are indicative and they are subject to change. So after all that, why should you consider applying to Prepared with your idea for your postdoctoral research? Well, Prepared offers really unique networking and training opportunities. We're very excited to be able to develop a new generation of disability rights researchers who are really dedicated to evidence-based research and committed to making an impact on policy development. If you join Prepared, you will have dedicated supervision from both academic and civil society organisations and the chance to apply your ideas to real-world problems, working in partnership with disabled people and their allies to co-design inclusive and effective solutions. Prepared, as I said, has some positive conditions, in comparison to other postdoctoral fellowship opportunities. We consider that our funding available for our postdocs is relatively generous and that our contracts, as I mentioned, go longer than most postdoctoral opportunities. So the approximate gross salary is about 50,731 euros annually, and there are additional costs for payments that can be made to fellows who are eligible for a family allowance. In addition to the annual salary, Prepared also provides further financial contributions towards the research costs, including travel and training and career development activities for the fellows. So that concludes my overview of the project and the current call for stage 2 of the project. And with that, I am now going to introduce you to some of the partners who are the supervisors who are open to accepting Prepared fellows in their employing organizations. So I'm going to begin with my colleague in Switzerland, Carla Sabariego. Over to you, Carla, to explain your areas of expertise and interest for applications.
So thank you very much, Eleonor. Then I'm happy to be able to present briefly who I am and what is the institution that I'm representing. I have actually what is called a bridge professorship. So I have contracts and positions in 2 different institutions. At the University of Lucerne, which is a partner of Prepared, I am a professor for healthy aging and rehabilitation. I'm also the head of our rehabilitation department, and I am also director of our Center for Rehabilitation in Global Health Systems, which is a WHO collaborating center. So we have very close contact and close work with the World Health Organization. But I represent here today the other institution that I work for, and this is the Swiss Paraplegic Research. The Swiss Paraplegic Research has a focus, as the name says, on spinal cord injury and is committed to very comprehensive research. We call it 360 degrees. So we are not only interested on clinical research about spinal cord injury, but pretty much on research that looks at participation, inclusion in society, autonomy, dignity, those kind of topics. At the Swiss Paraplegic Research, I am the lead of one of our research groups, and it's called Aging, Functioning Epidemiology and Implementation Research. So I have one very strong focus on aging in general, but also aging with a spinal cord injury or acquiring a spinal cord injury at older ages. And this is becoming more and more common because of the big demographic challenge that we have at the moment, so the aging of populations in general, leading to, for example, more injuries due to falls from low heights and leading to a spinal cord injury. And in the area of spinal cord injury, I'm very much interested on an equitable and fair access to health services, especially long-term care. Long-term care has been shaped so far, is also a big challenge of our time. So the provision of adequate and long-term care to the population who needs it, but it's mostly designed to meet the needs of the aging population, and many times does not meet the needs of persons with disability. And this is the case for spinal cord injury. We know we have been conducting some work on that the needs are not met. So this puts a burden on the people, on the persons. This puts also a burden on the families, and this has a huge impact on autonomy and inclusion in society. So I'm pretty much interested on access to long-term care for persons with spinal cord injury in specific, but also generally to persons with disability, and what can we do, how can we ensure that that long-term care system meets the needs really of persons with disability and has a positive impact on autonomy and inclusion. Another area of expertise that I see as an opportunity for Prepared is disability measurement. I have worked for many, many years with disability measurement, with WHO, actually being a consultant to WHO, and then in my position now as director of our WHO collaborating center. And what interests me quite a lot is disability measurement and the implications of how disability is measured to disability policy. And there are big implications there, depending on who we include as persons with severe disability and who we miss in this category, or whether we are considering or not persons with moderate disability. And I think that would be my summary for my interests. So I very much welcome you to come to SPF. We are a very interesting institution, very diverse institution, a very international institution as well. And yeah, so please feel free to contact me if you have further questions. I'm glad to get in touch with you as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you very much, Carla, for that overview of your areas of interest. I'm going to move on now to Paula Pinto in Lisbon to talk about your areas of interest. Paula, over to you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. It's also really a pleasure to be here in this second round for our Prepared Project webinar. So my name is Paula Campos Pinto, and I'm an associate professor of sociology at the Institute for Social and Political Sciences of University of Lisbon. I am currently the head of the sociology department at this institute, as well as the coordinator of the Disability and Human Rights Observatory and deputy director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Gender Studies. The Disability and Human Rights Observatory is a platform that brings together researchers, disability organizations, and policymakers to develop research, collect and analyze disability rights indicators, provide training and advanced education, and policy advice on disability rights and the CRPD in Portugal, as well as in Portuguese-speaking countries of Africa and Brazil. The work that I develop stems from my former involvement with Disability Rights Promotion International, which was a very large international project that ran until 2015 and which developed a system to monitor disability rights globally through participatory methodologies. And in this role, so I have an experience in supporting research on disability rights carried out by disability organizations in many parts of the world: Africa, South Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Canada. For 15 years now, also, I've been involved with what was called initially ANED, Academic Network of European Disability Experts, and it's now called European Disability Expertise, which is a pan-European network that also collects and analyzes and provides scientific data relating to national policies, working very closely with the European Commission on the situation of persons with disabilities in member states and advising policy change there. I've also been the PI in numerous national and international research projects that related to disability, human rights, gender, and the impact of policy on people's lives. So broadly speaking, I would say that my research interests lie in disability and human rights. Research on independent living, the institutionalization, legal capacity and self-determination, social and political participation, and access to the labor market are all areas that I've worked in and am interested on. Across all these areas, I'm particularly keen on exploring the intersection of gender, class, ethnicity, and disability, and this both in countries of the global south and north, and using both qualitative and quantitative methods and participatory research approaches. So in this second call, I look forward to host a postdoc researcher at the observatory in the beautiful city of Lisbon to develop research that will take a disability perspective to address issues such as gender and disability in the context of migration and asylum seeker crisis, climate change and disaster response, especially in relation to gender roles and livelihoods, both in the global south as well as in global north, as well as, for example, artificial intelligence and the changes that is bringing to the labor market and the opportunities and challenges that this may create to persons with disabilities. Because of the partnerships we have in the observatory also, we are able to offer the opportunity and the conditions for you to develop groundbreaking research while engaging with the disability community and policymakers, so that the research that you develop tackles real-world problems and achieves maximum social impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula. I will now move on to your colleague, Teresa Pinto, to share your areas of interest for supervising potential applications in Call 2.
Thank you, Eleanor. I hope you hear me correctly. So good morning. My name is Teresa Janela Pinto, and I'm an assistant professor at the Institute of Social and Political Sciences at the University of Lisbon. So working directly with Paul on multiple projects in this organization, I coordinate currently the Master in Social Policy, and my main scientific area is social policy, though I often bridge this area with sociology and social work, both in teaching and research activities. I'm also affiliated with the Disability and Human Rights Observatory, which Paula already presented, where I currently serve as a adjunct coordinator. And I'm also a researcher with the Center for Interdisciplinary Gender Studies. So as a researcher, I've been involved in research projects addressing social services, social benefits, legal capacity reform, inclusive employment and education, and more broadly, the implementation of international human rights frameworks and its effect on disability policy. So across these areas, a recurrent concern in my work is how these normative and rights-based commitments, especially those set out in the CRPD, translate into concrete social policies and programs, institutional arrangements, and everyday practice. So this has led me to examine processes of policy production, but also policy reception from the point of view of the users and their movements, and how all of these principles are often reinterpreted and enacted at different settings, both internationally, national, and at community levels. So all this multi-level perspective is also something I'm very keen on. I'm also interested in dynamics of policy contestation and social change, including claims-making processes, social movements, participatory and co-constructive practice. In my work, I have collaborated regularly with civil society organizations and multiple stakeholders in order to bridge research and policy action. I am also a member of the International Foundation of Applied Disability Research, FIHA's Ethic and Scientific Committee, where I evaluate applied research proposals in the field of disability studies. And this also connects to the strong interest that I have in applied research and interdisciplinary collaboration in the field of disability. So in terms of what I would like to see in terms of some of the possible collaborations within the Prepared project, very broadly, there are a number of themes that I would be interested in that connect also with these global challenges. So on one hand, the governance and reform of social services, including institutional change, the institutionalization, independent living, and community transformation. Intersectional approaches to disability policy, including gendered and life course perspectives, early intervention, education, and family policies, and its connection to disability policy. The responsiveness and co-construction processes in social services. So this analysis of how services and organizations can adapt their rules, practices, and modes of intervention to the lived realities, the needs and the preferences of persons with disabilities and DPOs, and all the processes of user-led change and co-production in welfare policy. As I was saying, I'm also very interested in claims-making processes, social movements, and the articulation of demands and rights-based policy agendas and institutional practices, and also in eco-social policies and disability-informed just transition. So how can we adapt this great challenge now that is how to transform even the core values of welfare policies to these new challenges. So if any of these resonates with your research interests, or if you have other ideas that you would like to discuss that could fit broadly into these perspectives, I would be looking forward to discussing with you and to deepening some of the ideas, and to welcome you in usually sunny Lisbon, not so much so in the past few weeks, but also within our collaboration within the center. Thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you very much, Teresa. So I'm now going to move on to my colleague, János Fiala-Butura, and I'm going to share some of János's areas of potential interest for supervision. So bear with me, and we should be able to share that now. Okay, just confirming that that's visible, I hope.
I'm a lecturer at the Center for Disability Law and Policy at the University of Galway. And I am one of the supervisors in the Prepared project. My main area of expertise is human rights law with a focus on disability rights. And within that, I work on topics such as legal capacity, mental health law, independent living, freedom from torture, and others. And I'm happy to supervise any research projects within these areas which push the boundaries of our existing knowledge. And here I will give you some advice because I already have received a lot of applications. This is a postdoc project, so you don't need to demonstrate only knowledge of existing area of human rights law, but in your project you should propose how your research will further our knowledge. So if you're proposing to do empirical work, for example, that is very good. It should just be clear from the proposal how the data what you find will progress our knowledge in these areas. So the areas I mentioned are always my area of interest, but more in general, how human rights law can be implemented, its effectiveness, the role of international bodies in making sure that human rights law is implemented are always general questions what I'm interested in. So specifically with regard to the CRPD, we have a lot of open questions in this area. How exactly do we achieve compliance with international human rights standards? And within this larger field, lately I'm very much interested in how the CRPD interacts with other international human rights standards. So we know that the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, transforms not only disability rights, but it has a transformative effect on human rights law in general. And we can see this best when we compare it to other human rights treaties. So I have written lately about the standards of the CRPD versus the European Court of Human Rights in the area of mental health law, and another article in the area of disability rights. I'm very much interested in these questions, but always think about how a comparison will tell us something new about the larger question of how disability rights standards can be effective, can be implemented. So the comparison is not for its own sake. We hope to learn something from it. Connected to this, I'm also interested in how human rights law in general and the CRPD in particular treat its difference. So we know the CRPD is an anti-discrimination treaty, but what does that exactly mean? I think the CRPD transforms equality law as well. And this can be seen in several areas. So obviously all the ones I mentioned, legal capacity, mental health law, and the others, but right to vote, independent living, accessibility, education, right to family are also areas where this can be tested. And empirical work has there's a lot of space to do empirical work here. So within these larger fields, I'm happy to receive ideas for applications, which you can develop with me further. The real question for me, of course, whether I have the basic expertise, but if it's human rights law, I'm interested roughly in your proposal. The question will be, do you have an idea? Do you have a hypothesis, a research question which will move our existing knowledge further? And you have to demonstrate that you know the existing literature and you have a workable idea, a feasible idea for a research project, which will tell us something new. So I'm very much looking forward to discuss your proposals with you. Thank you.
Okay, so that was my colleague Janos, and now it falls to me as the final supervisor in Prepared to briefly outline some of my areas of interest for accepting potential applications. So, as the others have done, I'll give a small bit of background on my own research interests. I did my PhD on disability advocacy in a comparative study between Ireland and Australia. And then I worked on a postdoctoral project about the effectiveness of national disability strategies as a mechanism for implementing the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And since then, I've gone on to develop more research in the arenas of legal capacity, reproductive justice, and also on social movements of disabled people and their strategic approaches to implementing, monitoring, and making real the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in lots of domestic contexts. I'm also very interested in deprivation of liberty, in proposals or ideas about abolition of incarceration, and thinking through different ways in which work to combat regressive practices and policies that are gaining traction throughout the world can be addressed through a disability inclusive lens. So when we see the ways in which reproductive freedom is being curtailed throughout the world, or the ways in which very regressive practices are being applied to migrants or anyone who might be suspected of being a migrant in different contexts, we need to think about how we can tackle these challenges from a disability inclusive perspective. Huge kind of global challenges related to climate justice and to a resurgence of far-right politics and how those can be combated from a disability inclusive perspective are also things that I'm really interested in. My work is often at the intersection of gender, disability, and aging. And as we see the potential development now of a new human rights convention on the rights of older people, there's a lot to be learned and gained from the disability movement as that work continues with the older people's movements. So thinking about those intersections and how movements can collaborate and learn from each other, as well as understanding the tensions and conflict points between movements and how those might be better navigated by the movements themselves, and what we as scholars can learn from those tensions and interactions is something that I'm also really, really interested in. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'm going to move on so that we can hear from the secondment host organizations who fellows in the Prepared project will have opportunities to apply their research knowledge in different contexts with if they choose to go on secondment to any of our partner organizations. So I'm going to begin with Manel Miri from Inclusion International. I was going to give a brief overview of Inclusion's areas of work and priority so that fellows can determine whether a secondment at Inclusion might fit the research project they have in mind. So over to you, Manel.
Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor. Hello, everyone. My name is Manel Miri. I'm the Advocacy Director at Inclusion International. Inclusion International is the global network of persons with intellectual disabilities and their families. We have 137 members in 79 countries through all the regions. Our members represent organizations of self-advocates or families of persons with intellectual disabilities, and other type of organizations like service providers who work with persons with intellectual disabilities. So our organization is a charity organization registered in the UK. We have an office in London. We are a team of 10 people based mostly in the UK, but we have others like me, so I'm based in Tunisia. We have other team members of the team who are in the USA, in Malawi, and in Italy. So what we do as an organization, what does our Inclusion International does? So we do have projects and programs. We have a self-advocacy program, which is based on strengthening self-advocates. So by self-advocates, we mean persons with intellectual disabilities. We also have a program called Listen, Include, Respect, which is for supporting organizations to be more inclusive of persons with intellectual disabilities. And we have an inclusive education program, which has a catalyst for inclusive education. And we also have a project on inclusive education in humanitarian context that is being implemented currently. In addition of projects and programs, we also do our major work. So we do global advocacy. So we work at UN platforms, as example, the Conference of States Parties. We also do other types of platforms or summits, which are about where we try to raise the voices of persons with intellectual disabilities and families, like the Global Disability Summit. We also support our members in the treaty body reviews, the country reviews on the CRPD mainly, but also other treaty bodies like the CEDAW committee or the Convention on the Rights of Children. The topics that we work on, we have a few topics that were identified as our members as the priorities, like inclusive education, inclusive employment, community inclusion, deinstitutionalization, support to families. So these are examples of topics that we work on. Other topics or areas that we work on specifically, maybe this year, or we have started a few years ago, considering because they are emerging areas, are care and support, for example, which is a very important topic for us, considering that we represent both people with intellectual disabilities and families who are both. So we represent those who provide and those who give care and support. Deinstitutionalization, of course, social protection, legal capacity is also an important topic for our network. Humanitarian context, as I mentioned, we have a project on inclusive education in humanitarian context. We also did recently a project on women and girls and gender-based violence in humanitarian context. Climate change is also a new topic for us. We didn't do much on it, but this is a priority area for us this year and in the upcoming years, considering its importance at the global level and also the impact that climate change can have on people with intellectual disabilities. So mostly these are some of the topics that we work on, but again, there are so many things that we are open to work on, mainly anything that relates to human rights and person with intellectual disabilities. I think we can offer a good access to people with intellectual disabilities and families and a big range of organizations globally. Happy to hear any interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manel. I'm going to move on now to Mary Kyo from CBM Global, who's going to share some of their priority areas of work for potential applicants interested in doing a secondment with them.
Thanks, Eleanor, and hi, Manel. Manel and I work together. So hello, everyone. I work with CBM Global, which is a federation that operates across 16 countries, where we work on a range of various different topics, ranging from community inclusion to system strengthening, to national, global, and regional advocacy, to technical advice and working with mainstream stakeholders about how to do their work better in disability inclusion. In our advocacy space, we have kind of 4 key priorities. The first one is around access to health services and community services. So we look at trying to generate evidence and data around the challenges that people with disabilities face in terms of accessing services. So we do that in partnership, co-partnerships with OPDs. That's our philosophy of how we work. So, for example, last year we did a piece of work with deaf Indigenous women in Bolivia around their access to healthcare services. We also do work on data, as I said, and that is very much around looking at trying to fill the data gaps and work with citizen-generated data, which is a very kind of big growing area to fill the gaps that national statistics offices have with regard to being able to tell, to tell the statistics and the stories of disabled people. So, for example, we've done work on that in the Philippines with local governments around doing a whole citizen-generated data mapping. That's now kind of developed and moved more into kind of the UN as being shared as a good practice. So very much a lot of our advocacy work is very kind of research, participatory research designed and co-designed with disabled people's organizations. I guess the big one that we focused on in terms of the last 5 years is on climate justice. We did a very small scoping exercise back in 2018, 2019, just to see where disability was fitting into the climate policy conversation at national and global level, and found that it wasn't. So over the last 5 years, I've done quite a lot of work across all of the countries that we work in, and actually have been supported by people coming in on placement to help with doing some of the actual research that was done. So, for example, we've produced 3 research reports around the challenges that disabled people face in terms of accessing the mainstream climate movement, in terms of being connected into policy. And we also support partners, attending the yearly major kind of policy conferences in climate. One is the famous one that gets covered every November, the COP conference, but also there are similar conferences happening in Bonn. So we very much kind of, with the work that we do, it's very practical based, it's co-designed with organizations of persons with disabilities and very participatory. So you get very hands-on experience. The team I work with are a global team. Because it's a federation, you have access into teams across different countries. And we basically bring all of our work together in kind of a very collective way. So there'd be exposure across a number of different countries, a number of different teams. And so, yeah, so that's kind of very much it. It's very, so our kind of planning for the next 2 to 3 years is we're doing a midterm review of how our advocacy roadmap for climate has been implemented so far. And we're looking at developing the next phase of that. So very much on the very practical focus work over the next couple of years on climate justice. Yeah, so that's it, Eleanor, I think, if that's okay. But yeah, climate and data would be kind of the key areas, I think, which we have a lot of energy around at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mary, for that. Great to hear from our secondment host there about all the potential practical applications of the ideas that the postdoctoral fellows might be working on and developing. So I'm now going to move on to our final 2 speakers for today, we're very excited to introduce, our 2 fellows who have recently commenced work under Call 1. I'm going to begin with Philippa Duell-Piening to give her tips and strategies to potential applicants based on her own experience in Call 1.
Thanks, Eleanor. So my colleague Bear and I started in the prepared positions just last week. So since everything's very new to us, we're just going to focus on the application process rather than the actual fellow roles that we're in at the moment. So I'm an Australian. My PhD was undertaken at the Melbourne Law School at the University of Melbourne, and my experience is outside the European system, while my colleague Bear is European and will discuss the prepared grant requirements in more detail from a European perspective. My project is about technology and disability rights, specifically the impact of advanced digital technology like AI on the autonomy of people with disability. This project emerged from my PhD research, but it's not directly related. Rather, over the course of my PhD on disability data and human rights, I noticed more and more conversations about the use of data for training AI, and I became more curious about the impact of AI on disability rights, how it both enhances and restricts rights. When the prepared call came out, I was working on another proposal which didn't really fit with the prepared aims to respond to the most urgent global challenges of our times. So I didn't really think the fellowship was for me at the start, but over time, I wondered whether this nagging feeling to learn more about the impact of AI on disability rights could grow to become a coherent, comprehensive project proposal. I set aside a few days to read, write, and think on this topic. And through this process, some research questions began to emerge, along with a possible methodology. At this stage, I started thinking about where this project will be located and who would be the best mentor for it. I identified the skills and knowledge that I brought to the project, as well as the gaps where I'd need mentoring and guidance. And I watched the prepared webinar. I was in a different time zone, so I watched the recording and then read online about the different centres and the academics who were the supervisors. I then emailed János at the Centre for Disability Law and Policy here at the University of Galway, and I sent an abstract of my proposal, my CV, and an explanation of why I felt he would be a good mentor for this project. So my reasoning for approaching János was his track record of extensive work in understanding rights and obligations associated with human autonomy in a disability context. János also has extensive connections across Europe, which I don't have, and that I thought this might be helpful to identify people who might want to work with me on this project. From there, János said the project looked like a good fit, but he also had a few questions. And he asked me to send the full proposal a few days before the submission date so he could review it and then provide a letter of support. So I'm going to share 4 key learnings from my experience of the prepared application process. Firstly, find a project that you're curious, interested and passionate about. You need to explain why this research is important and how it addresses one of the most urgent global challenges of our time. Secondly, spend time researching a supervisory match. Approach your supervisor early with a brief outline of your project so they can assess the fit as well. Make sure you allow time to send your full application to your supervisor before the submission deadline. Negotiate these timelines directly with the supervisor. And of course, one person cannot meet all your mentoring needs. So it is okay if you also need other mentors. It's good to be honest about these mentoring gaps and describe how you may seek this support elsewhere. For instance, in my project, János and I discussed the need for mentoring on technology governance from someone else. Thirdly, I've learned the EU's desire for transparent, merit-based system for grant applications has led to a highly structured process with very specific terminology. As an outsider, I was unfamiliar with this, and to be honest, because I came to the grant application a little late, I didn't have time to learn it. So my advice, is to follow the application form closely and respond to all questions, because the application form has a number of prompts that are really helpful to ensure that you provide information that is required to communicate how you fulfill the criteria. If you don't understand the terms, seek to clarify their meaning. There are many online resources for the Marie Curie grants. To prepare my application, I use the evaluation criteria matrix also on the prepared website. That's quite useful. My fourth and final point is this application process, unlike the Marie Curie postdoc application process, has an interview, and the interview is actually very important. It holds a big weighting in your overall score. It's half the score assigned to your application. So my advice is to take the interview very seriously. Think carefully about how you're going to succinctly communicate the importance of your research and how it meets the evaluation criteria. Before the interview, you will receive written feedback from the 3 reviewers, and this is really helpful to identify areas you need to strengthen in your proposal before you move on to the interview. So in summary, my advice is identify a research topic aligned with a prepared aim that you're passionate about. Find a good supervisory match. follow the instructions on the application form closely, and take the interview seriously. And with that, I want to wish all the applicants the best of luck, and I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Bear.
Thank you so much, Philippa and Eleanor and everyone. I am delighted to participate in this event, and I will talk about my experience of applying for the prepared postdoctoral fellowship and share also some tips on developing the research project. For context, I obtained this fellowship for a project entitled Advancing Feminist Disability Math Justice in Human Rights-Based Care and Support Systems, which is supervised by Eleanor Flint, and I am based at the Center for Disability Law and Policy. You can find a summary of my project on the Prepared website. I had previously submitted the FEMADIS-J project to the Maria Curie European Postdoctoral Fellowship. In that previous call, I was well placed, but in the waiting list. I also received a seal of excellence, but this could not be used for the country I wanted to go. I intended to reapply for the next Maria Curie European postdoctoral call, improving the project with the feedback I had received from the peer reviewers. However, when the prepared call was announced, I decided to take the advantage and the opportunity as it focuses on my line of research. Unlike other postdoctoral calls, the prepared call lasts for 3 years, and that was appealing. I therefore reworked the project considering suggestions from the Maria Curie Postdoctoral Fellowship evaluators and seizing the opportunity to make other improvements in the proposal. Why I was interested in the prepared postdoctoral fellowship. I wanted to promote the internationalization of my research career and improve my English. And I was looking for a postdoctoral fellowship that would allow me to develop my own research project independently and offer good working conditions. Furthermore, I was reassured that in this type of Maria Curie-based calls, the most valued thing is the quality of the project and the applicant's ability to carry it out according to their track record. This approach does not penalize those of us who have written monographic doctoral dissertations rather than compendia of articles. Now, based on my experience, I would simply like to give you some tips. First, start early and find a good institutional fit for your project in terms of both your supervisor and the institution. Communicate your idea to the supervisor who suits you best first and try to base your proposal on shared interests. Furthermore, as this call is part of a project that is co-founded by the Maria Curie Actions, it uses European research terminology. It is therefore crucial that you familiarize yourself with this terminology. For me, it was useful to create an Excel detailing the meaning of each term, like work packages, deliveries, milestones, citizen science practices. I mean, there is a lot of specific European terminology for research projects. It is also important to write the project proposal according to all the evaluation criteria and try to justify how you are reaching each one. It was also useful for me to see examples of projects submitted by people who had applied for and received a Maria Curie postdoctoral fellowship, as these were very similar to the prepared call. This helped me to learn how to organize my own application and which aspects were highly evaluated. It is also important to consider the project's impact at various levels, the social impact in addressing global challenges related to the greater inclusion of disabled people, of course, but also the scientific impact and the impact on your career development, which are also evaluated. A good advise you to review the project thoroughly and, if possible, pass it on a colleague for them to suggest improvements. It is also important to view the grant application process as an opportunity to learn. The best scenario, of course, is to secure the grant. However, if you are unsuccessful, you will still have a fairly mature project and very valuable feedback to help you improve it and reapply for similar grants. Each time, your project will be that much closer to securing funding. Thank you very much, and I wish you the best of luck with your applications.
Thank you very much, Bea, and to Philippa too, for those very vital tips from the perspective of applicants. I think people will find those very, very helpful. So we're now reached the Q&A portion of the webinar, and because we are recording this webinar and will be available afterwards, I just want to orally answer some of the questions that have been submitted in the Q&A box for the record, so that those watching later on will also be able to have this information. But in the meantime, if you have more questions, please feel free to keep either posting them in written form into the Q&A box, or attendees can also press the raise hand button and we can enable your microphone if that's the most accessible way for you to ask your question. So let me tell you what's been asked and answered related to the criteria in the Q&A box. So the first question we received was about flexibility on the award of the PhD itself. And I'm afraid there is no flexibility there, because the Marie Curie rules are very clear that the applicants must have already met all the criteria to have their PhD at the point of application. So I'm afraid there's no flexibility with that one, but it's good for people to know in advance before applying. Another question relates to the English language competencies and what kinds of proof would be acceptable for that. So we also have some information on our website, preparedresearch.eu, in the FAQ section, with the various scores from different English language certification processes that we would accept. But I will also say, in answer to the question we received, that if people have undertaken a program of study through English at an English-speaking university or an English-speaking program, or they have published in English, then academic publications in English will also count towards proving the English language proficiency criteria. So I think it's important for everyone to have that information. The final question I want to address from the Q&A is related to the page limits of the proposal document. So we have a 10-page limit for the proposal. The question was whether this included bibliography and references. It does. But the question asker also asked whether footnote references can appear in a smaller sized font, because the main text of the proposal we require to be submitted in size 12. So yes, you can, the footnote references can be a smaller sized font, around size 9 or 10 is fine for us. So that will help to save a little bit of space, but the main text of the proposal must still be size 12. Okay, I see we have one more hand raised in the audience. So we're going to enable the microphone so this person can ask their question on the mic. If I can manage to do that, I will. So Amin, I think, should be able to ask your question now.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for organizing this webinar, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm Amin, I'm from Tunisia. I teach law at the university. Of course, I'm a PhD, and since 2017, I don't know if the year counts also, because it has been almost 10 years. So it was me who asked you about the proficiency in English, since most of my publications are in 3 languages, French, English, and Arabic. And also I teach in English, so I guess this proves well the proficiency in English. So my question is about the proposal. So as one of the fellows said, when she sent her proposal to Dr. Jonas, she sent also the CV. So I would like to clarify two things here. So the proposal limit is 10 pages, including references, and so I mean, in the proposal, do we need to put the outline to be the proposal to be more in details, and what other attached elements or documents do I need to send to the supervisor?
Okay, so this is a good question because it's about what should you send to the supervisor in order to see if they're a good fit, which is a different question from what must you upload on the application portal to actually complete your application. I think I'm hoping any of the other supervisors who have very specific requirements would also join me in answering this question. But from my side, I would expect to see a draft of the proposal using the proposal template from prepared, but the CV doesn't, at the point of approaching me, does not need to be in the prepared template format, although you will need to upload it in the correct template for the official application. I think, this helps us to see at a glance whether someone has the experience and depth of knowledge. And so at that point, I wouldn't require anything else, except maybe if it's not addressed in the proposal, I would expect applicants to communicate to me in a separate document or in the text of the email their plans for field work in more depth if they feel they need to do that, or if they plan to do some sort of field work, including what contacts or networks they have that they would use to complete the fieldwork. Also, what potential secondment organizations they would like to be based in or during the course of their fellowship. And if they have additional secondments that are not currently on our list, that they would already be flagging that at the point of contacting me. So those are the things I would like to see, but I'm going to reach out to my fellow supervisors here to see if anyone else wants to add anything that you would expect to see when an applicant contacts you looking for support for their proposal. So I'm not sure if Paula or Teresa or Carla want to add anything. You can just turn on your microphones if you need to.
I think you mentioned the essential. Thank you, Eleanor.
Great. Okay. So hopefully that answers your question, Amin. And I don't see any other questions at present. So I'll just give it another minute or two and see if there are any other questions. Just to remind you all as well that if you have questions after the webinar, you can always send them to us by email. So if you want to contact the Prepared project, you would email prepared.eu@universityofgalway.ie. So that email inbox is monitored by us here at the University of Galway, and we will be able to respond to any follow-up questions related to the call that are sent to that email address. Okay, so I think that seems to conclude the Q&A on. So I thank you for those questions, and I hope those answers have been useful to those of you who are considering applying. So all that remains really is for me to thank all of the contributors to today, my fellow supervisors in the Prepared project, our secondment organisation partners, the fellows from Call 1 who have generously shared their tips and advice, and also all of the team who have enabled today's webinar to be successful, including our captioner and sign language interpreters, who we very much appreciate for making today's webinar more accessible. So I'll close the webinar now, and as I said, you can follow up with any questions to prepared.eu@universityofgalway.ie. Thank you very much.